Hey everybody, welcome to episode 46 here on What About Therapy. I'm Enoch and Austin, and I'm a certified mindfulness life coach.
And I'm Austin Ivy, and I'm certified in the basics of acceptance and commitment therapy, and we're both going to school to be marriage and family therapists.
In this episode, like you already know, we're talking about Stranger Things, and we're going to relate that to therapy. So let's get right into it. All right, before we begin, before we say anything, there will be spoilers in this episode.
Yes.
For Stranger Things Season 4. So if you have not seen it, at least if you have not gone past episode 3, at least.
Yeah.
No, maybe 4.
I would say 4 to be safe.
Yeah.
I think that's, yeah.
Yep, 4 to be safe. If you have not gone past that point, I hate to say it, but this episode may not be for you until you finish that episode. Or if you don't care about Stranger Things, then obviously it won't matter for you.
If you're watching it now and you haven't got to that point, which I'm surprised if you haven't, because I binged it in a day, 2 days, but just kidding. We don't want to ruin anything for you, so go watch it and come back and listen to it, because we're going to have an interesting discussion about Stranger Things in general, but more specifically season 4.
Yeah. Stranger Things Season 4 is actually really freaky.
It's crazy freaky. I was blown away by how dark they went with it.
Yeah.
And how, I don't know, almost evil in a way.
Yeah, possessive.
Because they've done
Straight
just
up.
scary with the previous seasons. Like the Demogorgon was just scary.
Mm-hmm.
The Mind Flayer was kind of eerie,
Mm-hmm.
because it was so, I don't know. And then season 3, the Russians, that was kind of funny. And then the weird monster was scary. But this is the first season where it was it's truly evil. So
Yeah.
I'm still down for it. It's hard to watch sometimes though.
Yeah, it was actually really scary. My wife and I were like, all right, this is going to be a daytime show.
Yep.
So
Yeah.
we watch it during the day.
Yeah. It's once the sun goes down, it's New Girl only for any of my New Girl fans out there. Hey, maybe we'll do that in the future. There's some good stuff with New Girl. We could break down some relationship stuff and some personality disorders on that. Have you ever seen New Girl? You watched
No, I think my wife tried to get me to watch
it?
it.
I think we've talked about this before.
And I just didn't. Not that I didn't find it lame or not funny.
Just didn't get into it.
I just didn't get into it.
Yeah, I understand that. Before my I met my wife, I'd heard about it, just didn't watch it, and then it's her favorite show. So I was like, well, why not? And now we've watched it 4 times. So whenever we're eating dinner together, we throw it on my laptop. So
I'll have to give it a fair chance.
it's pretty funny. There's a lot of relationship problems with it, and it's easy to diagnose or I guess related to couples therapy and things like that, or personality disorders run rampant in that show. So, and
Cool.
they're portrayed well. But anyways,
Anyway,
for anyone who hasn't seen Stranger Things, this might be kind of confusing to you. I guess we'll do our best to describe things, but I guess this is more catered to those who have seen it. You're probably listening to this because
wow.
maybe you heard that, but that was a dog. Maybe you didn't.
That was pretty intense.
Yeah, that was...
Just talking about Stranger Things, you're getting all
It's
spooky.
getting strange in here. But yeah, we're going to do our best to just keep it in context where if you haven't seen it, you can still enjoy it, like this episode. But you might hear some words and names and you're like, what in the heck is going on? What is this weird stuff? So sorry in advance.
Yeah, essentially, Stranger Things is about a group of young kids in a small town, and the town is apparently cursed, quote unquote, because a lot of sussy stuff start happening.
Paranormal stuff, I guess.
Yeah, inside of this little town. And it turns out there's an alternate universe called the Upside Down, and that's where some of the monsters live.
Yeah,
The
it's
Upside
where
Down.
all the antagonists and problems come from in this seemingly harmless town. And so season 1 through season 4, it's just different variations of problems that stem from the Upside Down, this alternate dimension that is this small town, but literally upside down in the way that it's dark, it's gloomy, everything's all...
It's always thundery and lightning-y.
Yeah,
and
it's toxic environment. There's monsters there, and the lightning's red, and everything's gray and has a dark tinge to it. So it's actually a pretty good allegory for mental health in general, I guess. It's kind of what drew us to it in the first place, that the Upside Down is a reflection of how good life can be, on one side. On the flip side, it's the same life or the same place, but dark, dreary, and everything just has like a gray or black tint to it.
Mm-hmm.
It's terrifying. So people with depression, I'm sure, could relate to something like that. But I guess that's not what we're going to get into today. But there's allegories and metaphors, analogies, connections to mental health all across all the seasons of the show.
Yeah.
So,
and if you think about it, in several seasons, they do get stuck in the upside down. And when they are stuck in there for a long period of time, bad things start to happen to them. Mm-hmm. And so you can think of that as, when you spend too much time in your head or in things like depression, anxiety, things like that, mm-hmm. then that's really when troubles start happening.
Yeah.
So, and they actually have awesome ways. Like in season 4, okay, if you haven't seen season 4 and you're going to watch it, just stop here.
Yeah.
Because we're going to start talking about it. But when Max is taken in the upside down, mm-hmm. The way to get out of it is to anchor yourself with something you love. Mm-hmm. And in this case, it's music. And so the song anchors her and opens up this portal to go back into her body and get out of the upside down. Mm-hmm. So mindfulness, baby.
Yeah, and I love how they kind of foreshadow that by going to the institution. And like back then, institutions were still kind of a big thing, and those had their pros and cons. We've talked about that in the past, but one of the doctors there say that like one of the best ways to get through to people that are lost or seemingly have no progress is through music. And mm-hmm. I've always been a big fan of music therapy and things like that, so it's cool how they tie that in. But it's more importantly anchoring to something that like you get out of yourself, out of your mind, you get out of the upside down through something that you care about, through turning to your values. That's kind of the way that when I watched that episode, it was like a couple of days ago when I finished it. I was kind of, I like the idea of the fact that it was like turning to your values, you're running towards your values, something that you truly care about is bringing you out of the curse.
Yeah.
So
it's cool.
Really cool stuff.
It's really deep. So what we're going to do here is we're going to go through an article from verywellmind.com. They're awesome.
Oh, yes.
We've referenced them a ton. And it's called The Relationship Between PTSD and Shame. So we're going to relate PTSD and shame to season 4 of Stranger Things and see the parallels between it and see what Stranger Things says we can do, or those that have struggle with PTSD or struggle with shame, things that we can do to maybe get out of it, and if we don't, to see the repercussions and the harm that it can do. Mm-hmm. So we'll jump right in here to the article, and then we'll go back and forth from the article to the show. So it starts off by saying, following exposure to a traumatic event, people may experience a variety of emotions, such as fear, anxiety, sadness, anger, guilt, or shame. Although all of these emotions may be very distressing, shame can be a particularly difficult emotion to cope with after trauma. So much so that there's increasing evidence that the experience of shame is associated with the severity of post-traumatic stress disorder, or PTSD symptoms, following a traumatic event. Okay, so we're mainly going to talk about 3 people. That is Chrissy, Fred,
I think, is the nerdy newspaper guy. Yeah.
So Chrissy, the cheerleader, Fred, the nerdy paper guy, and Maxine, or Max, the redhead, who's friends with...
Yeah.
I mean, you know who Max is.
We see in season 2. Yeah, season 3, yeah.
So all 3 of those people have had very traumatic experiences in their life. So, well, with Chrissy,
I think hers is more family trauma. Like when Vecna takes over her mind and she's floating in the trailer in that first episode, mm-hmm. she sees flashbacks of her parents like arguing, and
that's right.
We also see earlier in the episode, the first time we see Vecna, we see his feet. But like it's in the bathroom stall when she is it seems as though she's purging in the form of an eating disorder. She probably has like bulimia or bulimia nervosa. I read about that today in one of my psychology classes, so I know a little bit more about it now. But it seems that she has some type of bulimia. She probably feels shame over that, like the fact that she's hiding this eating disorder. So it's kind of like Chrissy's deal, but yeah.
Right, and that's also why she went to what's his face? Drug dealer.
Eddie Munson. Yeah,
Eddie.
the freak.
And she went to Eddie to try and buy some drugs off and wanted some weed. And then first she wanted weed, and then she's like, well, do you have anything stronger? Because she's trying to cope with, whether that be an eating disorder, which is also a way to cope with trauma.
There's high substance abuse rates between, like, in beating people with eating disorders. There's a really high substance abuse rate. Yeah.
So she's using drugs to cope with her eating disorder, and she's using her eating disorder to cope with her family trauma that she's gone through. So that's Chrissy. Now, Fred, we see that Fred had a flashback, or Vecna was showing him what he went through, and he was in a really bad car crash. That's why he has a scar across his face.
It's like from his nose, past his cheek.
Yeah. So he got in a really bad car crash, and the people that he hit were killed. And maybe anyone else that was with him as well in the car.
Yeah, I think there was a couple people, one person, but someone was killed. I can't remember how many. Yeah.
Yep, someone was killed, and so at first the police officer starts to say that he's a murderer, and starts to get really dark that way. And then Fred hears the clock, and he runs away, or goes towards the clock. I don't know why they all go towards the clock.
Yeah, I don't know
woods.
who does that.
But
horror movie.
Anyway.
Classic horror movie.
He ends up on a road, and he sees a burning car turned upside down, and a guy's crawling out of the car on fire, dying, and saying like it's his fault type of thing, or what have you done, or just things like that. So that was Fred's traumatic event. Now Max, if you go back to season 3 with Billy and the Moms, season 3.
Billy the cougar hunter.
So Billy the cougar hunter, he was killed at the very end by the big monster.
The Mind Flayer, that's what the official name.
Yeah, the Mind Flayer monster thing. He was killed, and obviously that was very traumatic for Max, because they all watched it, and it was, it wasn't a pretty sight.
Yeah, it was a
He sent
terrifying
a massive,
scene.
Tentacle arm thing into Billy's chest. And,
terrifying scene.
Yeah, very traumatic.
And Max was right there watching the whole thing. She screams Billy's name, and even though they didn't have a good relationship, it was obviously still hard for her to watch,
Right.
So,
I mean, even Zuko said that was hard for that to watch.
Yeah, he's heaving right here.
Yeah.
So.
Anyway, but I mean, you put yourself in Max's situation too, and you think of someone that you don't like, who's a family member, and you watch them die. You watch them get killed. You're still going to be just heartbroken. It doesn't matter if you don't like that person. We see it all the time.
Yeah.
You don't know what you have until it's gone, type of thing.
Yeah, and I'm rewatching season 2 with my wife right now, and we're towards the end because she's never seen it before, and we're finishing season 2, and Max is having a discussion with Lucas about Billy, and he kind of apologizes to Lucas for Billy's behavior, and is talking to him about it. She kind of opens up that he's actually not that bad, and he's having a hard time with the move and being away from his family, or from his home, and kind of alludes to the fact that his dad is kind of a piece of work, and we see that later in the episodes, that his dad is abusive, literally physically, emotionally, everything, the worst kind of parent. And I guess that's a whole different discussion on that, I guess. Yeah. But we can see why Max has such a hard time with it, because deep down she really did care for him. She just had a bad relationship with him. Mm-hmm. And
they are step siblings too.
Step siblings, yeah.
So that adds another layer of intense emotions and hard things to deal with.
Exactly. Yeah, and but I guess it just kind of goes along what you were saying, that even though she didn't like him very much, seeing that happen, that traumatic event happen to someone that was part of her life and that she did have a connection with, whether she liked it or not, deeply affected her. And that shows even how relationships like that can still have long-term effects on someone's mental health, and that can deeply affect them, even when it's not a deeply loved person or really someone you're really close with. It can be, PTSD can be set off so easily. I guess that's what I'm trying to allude to, especially in someone so young like that. It's all depiction, of course, right? But it's prevalent in young kids. Young kids can get PTSD really easily. But yeah, Max's PTSD is when Vecna comes to her, Billy shows up, and she's getting almost chastised, I guess, by him. And
Yeah, because she was at Billy's grave,
Yeah.
reading him a note saying how she actually loved him
yeah,
and
exactly.
wished
That's
that
what it
she
is.
could
Yeah.
have saved him.
Mhm.
And then Billy, when Vecna shows, appears to be Billy, he's like, "You wanted me dead. You hated me. You really didn't love me.
Mhm.
You were glad I died," and all that stuff.
Just kind of playing into all the things that like she's probably beating herself up anyways. And
Yeah.
I guess that's kind of the theme that we're going to get to with all these characters, that
Yeah.
Vecna's just using their shame against them.
Yeah.
And I guess we can go forward a little bit with the article here and distinguish between what shame is specifically. And the article does a really good job of telling us and teaching us what shame is versus guilt, because those two things might be easily confused, I guess. And it was enlightening to me to learn the difference. And so I'm just going to read straight from the article here. It says, shame is an emotion that occurs when you evaluate or judge yourself in a negative light. For example, you might experience shame if you view yourself as worthless, weak, bad, or useless. And then guilt occurs when you evaluate a behavior or an action as negative. For example, if you borrow money from someone and then fail to pay it back, you might experience guilt because you did something wrong, and it can be perceived as wrong or inconsiderate. And Enoch pointed this out to me before we started recording. The article, I guess, puts it even in italics, that shame is what happens when we evaluate or judge ourselves, like our behavior, like not our behaviors, but like our personalities and who we are as a person, like as a whole. And guilt is what we feel when we evaluate a behavior or a thing that we've done, more specifically. So instead of ourselves as a whole, we just feel guilt over a specific action that we took. And shame is more of a unhelpful overall feeling about ourselves that we feel worthless.
Yeah.
And guilt can have really powerful positive implications to where it can help us to improve our behaviors and right our wrongs and help other people. Whereas shame can be way more negative, broadly negative, where it drives us to feel worthless and meaningless. Everything's our fault, ruminating, anxiety, and get into deep depressions. And so it's important to learn that distinction because Vecna himself really, he personifies shame in the show. That he wants to remind you of everything you've done wrong and then make it feel like it's your fault. Kind of bring in guilt inappropriately through shame, so you kind of fall under his curse, so he can take advantage of you and kill you and use you for his purposes.
Yeah. It's actually really interesting because you can view Vecna as like your inner critic when you do something bad. So for example, let's say you stole something. Feeling guilty about it would be saying, "Oh man, I stole. Stealing is bad. I feel bad that I took this." And shame is saying, "I stole this. I am a bad person." So, judging yourself versus judging your actions. And in every situation with Chrissy, Fred, and Max, let's go through it. So, with Chrissy, now I want to be careful here because I don't want to say that whenever you feel shame through like PTSD, you can just, change your mindset to guilt, or type of thing. I'm not saying that. Let's just kind of have an open conversation about more of like how it would look if they felt guilty about what happened instead of if they felt shame. Now I know that you don't have a lot of control over that sometimes, and that's a part of it. But it is important to note the harmful effects of shame and how you can really start to look at it in a light of guilt.
Yeah. And you can find things that you could realistically, like things you could have done better, like, and maybe make some positive change. But like starting with Chrissy, if I'm remembering correctly, she remembered hearing words and like flashbacks of things that her mother had told her about being a failure, and I think maybe being too fat, things like that. That was obviously alluding to the fact that she had a eating disorder because of the way her mom treated her. But if Vecna personifies shame, then Chrissy is obviously, or I guess we could perceive that she's feeling that it's her fault that she is this way, and that it's her fault that she's a failure, and that her as a person is worthless because her mother perceives her as worthless and as fat and as I guess, a failure and a disappointment in her eyes. And so she,
Mm-hmm.
like we talked about earlier, she copes with that in different ways. She developed an eating disorder. She obviously blames herself for her family discord and family problems. And again, yeah, you could turn that into pinpointing, like, is there guilt in this shame? Like, other things that I realistically could do better. And I think anyone can do that. But what's most important is to get over the shame. Not get over it. That's not the right word.
I'd say go through it.
Go through it. Cope with it.
Accept it.
There we go. Accept the shame for what it is. And
yeah, and that doesn't mean you have to, I don't know, this is tricky.
You don't have to believe it to accept it.
Yeah, you don't have to believe it. Just like acceptance and commitment therapy, you acknowledge it. I guess that's a good way to put it.
Acknowledge its existence.
Yep, acknowledge the existence of shame. It's there. And now turn towards your values and start to work towards your values.
Focus on what's most helpful and focus on what's most important. And that could be pinpointing guilt and figuring out what you can do better to improve your life.
Yeah.
Like, what's some things that I have done wrong or I'm doing wrong that could improve? But it could also take the form of focusing on some self-compassion and some positive actions in your life that you could take that would turn towards your values more and would bring in feelings of more meaningfulness. I don't know if that's a word or not, but bringing more feelings of meaningfulness, bringing more feelings of fulfillment through turning to your values rather than living towards these socially compliant or familial compliant goals that are shoved on you to help you get over those shameful feelings that come from a monster with no nose. And I personally feel like kind of looks like the Grinch. And that's a whole conversation, but
when you tell me that, I can't unsee it, to be honest.
So funny.
I can't. It's bad.
Just look at his stomach. It's like kind of a pot belly kind of thing. It looks like the Grinch.
Yeah, I don't know what they were thinking when they're doing that. Like, dude, make him like...
The CG isn't amazing. Like, not the CG, but the makeup isn't super amazing on old Vecna.
Yeah, hey, it's better than CGI.
I mean, that it's all practical. That's super impressive.
He's also CGI too, but I mean, they did a lot of makeup for sure.
Yeah, I think when he's just like walking around, I think it's just makeup straight.
Yeah,
up. Like, and it's like when they do zoom ups on his face.
Yeah,
but yeah, I think that's a good way to think about it, though. It's kind of what if you want to like personify shame in your life, I feel like how you want to see it. Just picture Vecna. That it's not some helpful part of you that wants to help. It's a demon from another dimension.
Maybe not a scary one.
Yeah, maybe
if you're me anyway.
You don't want to
I'll picture the Grinch instead.
Yeah, there we go. Yeah, picture the Grinch as shame. Kind of a silly character that is just bitter and wants you to feel bad just like him.
Yeah.
You know, that's what shame is. If you want to personify it and like put a face to it, all shame wants to do is make you feel bad and worthless. Because that's like, again, it's kind of the inner critic that wants to improve and it's trying to do its best to help you. But it's just this really silly character that is thinking it's helping, but it's not.
Yeah.
And it really is making things so much worse.
Yeah, I have several thoughts, and I don't know if I'm going to talk about all of them. But to rewind a little bit, when Austin talked about compassion, we're not going to talk really much about compassion-focused therapy, but that is a modality that Austin and I recently learned about. Hashtag the virtual couch, Tony Overbay.
Thanks, Tony.
And I'm definitely going to look more into it. Austin and I both. It sounds just right up our alley. But compassion inside of shame is very important, because a lot of the times when you're in that moment, right, when you see Vecna, you're right there. You're in the upside down, or you're face to face with your shame. You can feel like garbage, straight trash. Like a trash human being, like you're a failure. And, why even be on this planet if you're such a failure?
Maybe I should just give in to Vecna. Like, it's probably better off that I just kind of let him do what he's going to do to me. Like let shame take over. Yep.
And I mean, really though, because with Vecna, if you just let him do his thing, you die. And so that could be related to suicide. We're not going to go there. But that's just a way... another thought there, but
I guess, and you could even say that you die emotionally when you just give into your shame. Like, you let all the parts that are meaningful and a part of you that are positive, you just allow them to die when you listen to the shame too much, when you give in to the shame, when you are fused to the shame. I guess that's an acceptance and commitment therapy word. But it's important to look at that because they kind of are. They're just fused to these feelings of shame that Vecna is.
I mean, they literally fuse with Vecna.
Yeah.
Like when he kills them, he's like fused to their head with his
tentacles,
claw thing. Like in
yeah. Just grabs their face and starts...
We're grabbing our head and stuff. You can't see it, but
the camera would be important right now. Yeah, like he literally gets. It's a good thing to point out that when people get to that point where they're so deep into their ruminations and their depression that comes with the shame, they're literally fused to the face with their shame. And I mean, I've been there. I really have. There's things that I feel shame over that I really related to these things that have happened to these characters in the show. Like I've never been in an accident that's killed someone, but I have my own experiences where I feel shame over or have felt shame in the past over. Yeah. And it feels like you're getting possessed by this demon and it can almost feel uncontrollable. But that's why I also really love the music thing aspect of it, that you can get out of it by turning to things that you care about. I don't know. I kind of brought that out of nowhere, but it's great. It's a real feeling of impending doom when you're really fused to your shame like that.
Yeah. And so keeping the perspective of having compassion on yourself, it doesn't mean getting rid of these feelings, right? We've talked about this a lot. It doesn't mean getting rid of them. It just means accepting them, being in it, right? And we use things like mindfulness to anchor ourselves in the storm and to be in the moment and have compassion with yourself. That is such a powerful skill, compassion. And that's exactly what it is. It's a skill. It's something that you can learn, and it takes time to have compassion on yourself, especially if you've dealt with things like PTSD and shame for years. It's even, that much harder to get out of that cycle and start to have compassion on yourself. But this is going to be really important in your healing, is having compassion with yourself.
Yeah. And shame in and of itself, when it becomes so, I guess, broadly common in your life, that like it can become a coping mechanism that you find almost self-worth in, or you find ways to describe feelings of worthlessness with your shame. Because, and this is something that I'm not going to steal from Tony Overbay. This is all him. I got it from him from the episode that we were alluding to earlier. He talks about that a lot of people come from childhood with childhood shame because they don't get attention from they get perceived inattention from their parents. And they feel like that as they grow up out of their toddler years, where they get less attention from their parents, they think, well, I'm not good enough. There's reasons that, like, the reason my parents aren't paying enough attention to me because I'm not good enough. And they use that shame that comes from that, I guess, that cognitive distortion that you're not good enough for your parents. And that's why they're not giving you the attention. That becomes your coping mechanism. That becomes the explanation as to why you didn't get this or that thing. Yeah. And it can become the neural pathway, the freeway through your thoughts. That's going to be the first thing you think of when something goes wrong. It's going to become your coping mechanism when things don't go your way. Oh, it's my fault. And that could be your way of self-soothing. Yeah. Is your shame. And so shame can just be a common thing in your life. It's not just like I feel shame over, like if you're Fred, he feels shame over the car crash. But it could get to a point in your life where that's just how you deal with everything. It's a super unhealthy way to deal. Some people drink alcohol. Some people shame themselves to cope with situations, because in a way it makes them feel better because they can find a boogeyman. They're their own boogeyman, Right. That's how they feel better. Well, like, this went wrong because of me. At least I know why it went wrong. It's because of me, even though it's not true. Yeah. So hopefully that ramble makes sense. But I guess the basic idea is that shame can become an everyday part of your life with everything, with every bad thing that happens to you, everything that goes wrong. And so we have to be very careful and focus on compassion so we don't turn it into our primary coping mechanism. It can be really detrimental to your health, mental health. Yeah.
Now here's another ramble. What's interesting is there's another modality, if you want to call it, or theory, called internal family systems. And this is where it's a lot like processing. If you go back to episode, 9, 4? I don't know. The episode that my wife is on, she talks about processing. And in processing, you go back to different moments in your life, usually when you're a kid, and essentially you talk to that version of yourself. Now, internal family systems, you bring out these emotions like shame, guilt, fear. You bring them out and you talk to them in your higher self. Because we all have a self, right? Like we've talked about with mindfulness. You are the entire lake. The higher self is at the bottom of this lake where nothing can disturb it. It's always calm. It's always clear thinking, level-headed. So you talk to these emotions as yourself, as your high self. Now, interesting concept. That's, this is going to be for another episode for sure. But to show where I'm going with that is shame is the brain's way of making sense of things when you don't know what happened, especially with traumatic events, because usually your brain's like, what just happened?
Yeah, it's how it copes.
Yeah, like when Fred, for example, got in a car crash and people were dead, he killed people. The brain, in order to make sense of what just happened, it turns it on himself and uses shame to make sense of it. To say, oh, this is your fault. You're a bad person. Now, you can look at it as a bad part of the brain or it's definitely unhelpful. But I think it's interesting that that part of the brain was made to protect you and to make sense of things, to help you learn and to just make sense of your world. And, whether that's helpful or unhelpful doesn't really matter. Just to know that the brain's trying to keep you alive, really, with everything it does. At its core, it wants you to stay alive, right? Because you die, it dies. So it's using these things like shame to help you make sense of the situation to maybe, I don't know, maybe it thinks you'll live longer because of it. Just a thought.
No, I love that, yeah. No more thoughts to add, but I have another ramble here if you're ready.
Let's ramble on.
We'll go ramble to ramble between people.
Let's get ready to ramble.
Ramble. This is kind of something that I don't know if you texted it to me or if it was in the text that you sent me earlier, but kind of how when you hide shame for too long, it becomes like it grows. Mm-hmm. And I think you alluded that into your text earlier as we were getting ready for this episode today. You see that in the episode, like the episodes of season 4, that as they try to hide it or they try to avoid it, or they hide it from their friends and their family members. Max hides it from her friends. Yeah. She hides it from her counselor. She hides it from her mom. Chrissy hides it from everybody, and she tries to suppress it.
Did she hide it from her mom? Because she never saw her mom. That was Vecna.
That's true. That's a good point. I guess we really don't know that. Yeah.
Anyway.
She's trying to hide it from herself, at least. The feelings of Vecna, the shame that come from Vecna, and probably the shame that she feels over her eating disorder.
Right.
She's trying to suppress it through drugs. And Fred, we don't see much of him just because it's so quick, but he obviously has some unresolved trauma. Like, otherwise, why would this be happening? And he doesn't say anything to Nancy when she asked, like, what's going on, Fred? Like, why are you acting weird? He just kind of he pretends that it's not happening.
Right.
And how often do we do that when we're ruminating, when we're in our own heads through ruminations over shame, when the critic is going off on us, or when we're just when we're stuck in these negative feedback loops of shame and depression. We make it worse on ourselves when we hide it, or when we avoid it, or when we try to suppress it. That's kind of the whole theory behind acceptance and commitment therapy. When we try to struggle with it, or when we obey it, it gets worse. Because the monster that we're dealing with, Vecna, gets stronger the more that we struggle with him. That's kind of the way that I perceived the show.
Yeah.
The more you try to fight him, the stronger he gets, because he kind of thrives off of, first of all, your shame. But second of all, he thrives over you trying to run from it. You trying to hide from it. Mm-hmm. And what's different about Max specifically is that she doesn't run from her fears. She turns towards her values. Like, if music represents and symbolizes her values, which I feel that it does in my own mind, she's not running away from it the way that, like, Chrissy was running through her house and, like, just trying to avoid it at all costs.
Yeah.
Max just kind of like acknowledged, like, you're right in front of me. You're Vecna. I'm going to rip off your little neck thing there. And I'm just going to run towards the music to a really good song that I added to my playlist this week. I like that song a lot. Running up that hill, make a deal with God. Like she's just running towards the portal.
Yeah.
It just shows that the proper handling of your feelings is going to make all the difference.
Yeah.
If you're going to run from it, if you're going to suppress it, if you're going to numb yourself with drugs or food or shopping or gambling or sex, whatever it is, it's going to get a lot worse because you're just going to put it under the rug and it's going to rot.
Yeah.
And
great point.
If you can acknowledge it the way that Max does in that scene at the graveyard and turn towards something that matters to you, that's going to be the way that ultimately you can overcome it in a meaningful way rather than like an effective way. Because you can overcome it in an effective way. I think medicine is a really good way to overcome things effectively, but meaningful and long-term, like actual healing rather than feeling better is going to be turning towards your values and appropriately talking about it with someone who you care about and that you know cares about you.
Yeah. I love that.
That's my ramble.
Yeah. Great ramble. Let me continue the ramble.
Let's do it.
So rewind it in Max's scene when she just, got done with Billy and she's running away from Vecna. She sees the red like mist start to come up, and like it's all dark and then she turns and it's all red.
Yeah.
And she gets curious. She's like,
what's that?
Like, okay, what's that? I'm going to go towards it.
And she's literally getting like tortured by Vecna like, in this moment.
So, she's running away from Vecna and she sees this red, even scarier looking mist, and she gets curious. And I think that's huge right there. That's a turning point where, curiosity is such a great tool to overcome strong emotions and things like shame. Is you don't run from them because we know what happens. Watch Stranger Things. You know what happens when you run from shame, from Vecna. It just gets worse. But if you take an approach like Max, she was in it, man. Like she was face to face with Vecna. She was just curious as she was trying to navigate and get out. Yeah, she was fully present. And she's like, oh, okay, I'm going to go towards this red, scary mist. And she does. And, whether that was a good decision or not, could she have gotten out of the Upside Down without that? I don't know. But her curiosity ended up getting her out of it, regardless. So that's my continued ramble.
No, I love that. It kind of builds even more to what I'm thinking even right now, that especially if you have a value of, I don't know if curiosity is a value, if like Russ Harris would call it a value. I definitely would. I would say I have a value of curiosity where I like to engage in learning new things. And just,
absolutely.
Like if I'm bored or feeling down, I'll randomly Google articles of just random stuff, or I'll look up YouTube videos.
How many of those are Star Wars?
A lot of them are Star Wars. A lot of them are Star Wars. And a lot of them are also random stuff. Like I Googled, it was on YouTube. I was like, what's the mechanism of action of of things for like bipolar medication? I wanted to know how it worked because like I know that like medication is typically the best way to treat bipolar. I was like, but what is that medication doing?
You're right.
Like, what is that even doing? So I watched this YouTube video of how it works and what it does to the neurotransmitters and what it binds to and what the pills are made of, all that stuff. And I'm never going to need to know that necessarily. I don't want to be a psychiatrist. I'm never going to prescribe medication to someone, but I just wanted to know, and so I did it. And I felt better afterwards because I turned toward my values of curiosity. Yeah. And I think that's another way that Max is turning towards her values is she's just, instead of being enveloped by the moment of fear and letting fear take over, she's like, well, I can't, there's not much I can do anyways. Let's run to the mist. Let's fight. Let's explore this. Like, and I love what Russ Harris says when it comes to engaging with negative emotions. He says, engage with it as though you're a child with peak curiosity. Like, view your anxiety, view your fears and your emotions like you're a child who's never experienced this thing before. Like a child who's never been on, like you're a toddler who's never seen a pumpkin before. Like it's your first Halloween, you've never seen a pumpkin. Like, what is this thing? Like, why it's round and orange? Like, engage with your negative emotions like a toddler seeing something for the first time with childlike curiosity. That's what he calls it, because you're going to start to notice things about it more that you haven't noticed before. And so if you engage with your shame in a healthy way, and just like, what is this saying to me? Like, what's the message in this?
Yeah.
Engage with it in a childlike curiosity. Like, what is this thing that I'm feeling? I felt it 100 times, but what really is this? You know, like, I'm curious about this. Where is this coming from? Do I have any thoughts going through my head or words that someone has said to me as I'm feeling these feelings of shame? Like, just turning towards that curiosity in a way. I think that could be such a beneficial way to open up the floodgates of knowledge of what truly is going on. And I think that's why curiosity is such a big role in that scene, because it, like, she sees Vecna's, like, his crib. I don't know, like his home. Like, I don't know where he resides. I don't know.
MTV
like
cribs.
his little like trophy room, because that's where the bodies are.
Yeah.
But that's also, like, I think is going to be integral to volume 2. I think her seeing that is going to be huge in the way that they defeat him.
Right. I mean, because she was there in the house, they found the house.
Exactly. Yeah. Exactly. I forgot about that. And
it's like episode 6 or 5, something like that.
So her engaging properly with this negative emotion, she was able to push things along in a positive way. And I think that could be one of the main messages that we're trying to send today, is that when you engage properly with negative emotions, rather than letting them rule you and just listening to it wholeheartedly, like we said, getting fused to it, allowing it to just grab your face and take advantage of you in a way.
Yeah.
Like how Vecna does.
Yep.
That's when things go wrong. But if you can engage with it in a childlike way, like childlike curiosity way, that's when things are going to be beneficial to you. And you can start to, I don't know, take control of the situation better rather than letting it control you.
Yeah. Yeah. And I mean, I guess to wrap up the episode, that's really going to be one of the best ways to get through shame is to, I guess, the 2 C's. You need to have compassion and be curious. And as you have compassion on yourself, you can explore shame more freely, because you are compassionate with yourself. And you know that, okay, this is okay. I'm not a bad person, but I'm feeling this way. I feel shame. Why? And that's when you can start going to the red mist and approach Vecna and just take him out. Yeah,
absolutely. And we always leave in little exercises and things, that I'm thinking of one right now, and this isn't my own.
Let's do it.
It comes from the Happiness Trap book. We've talked about how obsessed we are with that Russ Harris material, but I think he has a chapter on shame and guilt. I'll have to go back, cool. But I remember an exercise. It's a mindfulness exercise that he does, and he says to connect with a feeling of shame, choose a feeling like something that you regret, you have some shame over. That's not like traumatic. Like, don't connect with the feeling of you losing a loved one. Just maybe think of something small, like maybe you, I don't know, stole something from someone, or you had a situation like growing up, and you choose something a little bit less traumatic that has some shame tied to it, and find a quiet place where you can be alone and where it's safe, and for a moment or two, relive it. Allow yourself to connect with it, but with that childlike innocence, that childlike curiosity, and be with it for a minute. And figure out what it really is, explore it. And when you're done, take a few deep breaths and then turn towards your values.
Yeah.
To reground yourself. Maybe do one of those mindfulness exercises we talked about before. So think of a less traumatic, shame-based event that you maybe have struggled with. Connect to it with childlike curiosity. Do some deep breathing after connecting with it. And after that, turn towards your values and reground yourself, re-anchor yourself back to the moment. And then use that information that you've learned from that exercise to guide your further interactions with shame, or maybe with that shame as it comes in the future. So not a super helpful exercise, but it could be a way for you to just connect with your shame going forward in a healthy way.
Yeah, I think that's a great exercise. And one thing to note is when you do, if you think, you say to yourself, how do I explore my feelings or explore this memory? What's really helpful is to just, as you start to relive it, as you start to think about it, pay attention to how you feel, and where you're feeling that. And that's how you start to really explore that emotion, explore those feelings is where, and you could say it out loud. Say, I'm feeling this in my chest, or I'm feeling this in my head, or wherever you feel it, and try and follow it, see where it goes. Pay attention to the thoughts that come to your mind and how that reacts to your body. And that's simply exploring your thoughts and exploring your memories.
Yeah, and it could be a really good way to connect with the part of you that maybe has been repressed or suppressed, whatever Freudian term you want to use. But engage with it in a healthy way and understand it better.
Yeah. And of course, if you do have, really bad PTSD or shame, you can go see a licensed therapist, and they'll have the tools that you need to properly cope with it and to go through it and to process it.
They'll be able to guide you through those traumatic memories that we said not to go through on your own, because it can be really dangerous to go through those traumatic experiences and relive them by yourself. So if you really want to engage in those traumatic experiences and you want to not challenge them, but if you want to experience them and process them properly, please do it with a licensed therapist or a licensed psychologist, because that can be hard and very dangerous to do by yourself. So there's so many resources online. Just Google search therapist near me and find one that's in your insurance network, or just go to betterhelp.com. Not a sponsor. Maybe one day will be. But you can talk to someone. I think it's within 48 hours. I think that's their advertisement. You can text a licensed therapist within 48 hours. So
it's cool.
If you want to engage Vecna in an appropriate way, like really traumatic memories, the way that Vecna does, do it with a therapist. That's our recommendation and our almost my plead. Please don't do that by yourself, because that's hard. Yeah, no one deserves to go through that by themselves. So see a therapist for a couple times. Having
a therapist would be like having a guide in the Upside Down if you were Max, Fred,
having Elle with you, basically.
Chrissy. Yeah, and telling you what to do to get over it or to get through it, and to how to defeat Vecna. It's just having a guy there or a woman telling you what to do.
Yeah, someone who's experienced, how to get through it, who knows what the Upside Down is, and
like, do this, do that, okay, and
don't do this.
Yeah. Anyway, well, we hoped you liked this episode. I actually had a lot of fun.
Me too. Hopefully you guys did too, because we enjoyed making these types of episodes, and there's going to be a lot more.
Yeah. Yep. It's great. So this is just to help you be more aware that things that you can learn in therapy, things like this, like in Stranger Things, there's a lot to know there, a lot to learn, and it can really benefit you if you know what to look for. So we hope you have a great week, and we'll talk to you Thursday.
See you guys.
What about therapy? What about therapy? What about therapy? Yeah. What about therapy? What about therapy? What about therapy? Yeah. What about therapy? What about therapy? What about therapy? What about therapy? Yeah.